Okay, another week, another concern about anxiety and for voters because the actual race isn't anxious enough. Now we have to worry about potential violence. Another reason to vote early so you don't have to worry about potential shenanigans on election day. But let's get to the article. By December 2020, Donald Trump and his allies had been making false claims about widespread election fraud for weeks. Top election officials were facing threats. Then a young technician who worked for the company that makes Georgia's voting machines started receiving death threats too. So did his family. Walking into a press conference at the Georgia State Capitol, Gabriel Sterling, a top election official in the Secretary of State's office, was fuming. It has all gone too far. All of it. It has to stop, he said. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed. 4 years later, with another election underway, this heated climate has persisted. And some might say has gotten even worse. Former President Trump has been the target of 2 assassination attempts, including one at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, that left 1 man dead. Meanwhile, Trump's warnings of the potential for election fraud and language about immigration have fueled threats against election workers and some immigrant communities. The FBI warned in an October bulletin to local and state officials around the country, obtained by WABE, that extremists with election grievances could turn to violence in the coming weeks. The Bureau urged stepped-up precautions around possible targets such as polling places and election offices. Because that's great. I would think we're more prepared this time because now, I hate to say it, it's old hat, Sterling said in a recent interview. What I get concerned about is some new tactic. Sterling said law enforcement and election officials have been on guard to contend with novel strategies to subvert the vote. One security briefing, he recalled, law enforcement suggesting parking cars alongside a set of windows at a polling place. I asked why, Sterling recounted. To protect against a bomb attack. That's the level we're at now with some of these things. Are you kidding me? Bomb threats? Well, hopefully they're just threats instead of actual bombs, but still. What the hell? Sterling said dedicated election officials are doing everything they can to ensure a smooth election, and that voters should feel safe casting their ballots. He also hopes touting a consistent message of fair elections eventually breaks through the misinformation-soaked environment. Oh, one can only hope. It's kind of like the end of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, when he's sitting there doing his filibuster on the floor, Sterling said, referring to the 1939 Frank Capra film. And finally, senators say, there's no way he's still saying this stuff if there's not some truth to what he's saying. But that hasn't happened yet. Ironically, people will do that for misinformation, but for actual facts, they somehow come up with reasons why not to believe that. So, in theory, someone who keeps repeating the truth should be getting through. But it seems like it works with lies, that if you repeat a lie long enough, people start to believe it. Even the person saying it, knowing full well it's a lie, will start to believe it. But somehow it doesn't seem to work with facts. And I don't understand why. Trump has so far declined to say outright if he will accept the results of the election, saying he will only do it if it is a fair and legal and good election. Translation, if he wins. He and his allies have already made false claims about election fraud, disaster relief, and immigrants. Sometimes all together at once. After a grand jury indicted Trump in Georgia on charges that he tried to subvert the 2020 election result, to which he has pleaded not guilty, the jurors received a torrent of online threats. Right, because nothing says innocence like threatening people. Seriously. I mean, the way our system works, it would be really, really hard for the justice system to just, have a show trial. Because those usually only work if there's only a judge. If you're having a grand jury, that makes it harder to, but that doesn't stop conspiracy theorists. If you actually thought about all the energy and all the people it would take to be in on a conspiracy, you would realize that the conspiracy is not sustainable. But, so, this makes sense. I mean, people who believe in conspiracy theories don't bother to think. All right. And so innocent people get threatened. This is why in at least one of Trump's trials, the jurors' names were not given, and one of the instructions after the jury was dismissed was never tell anyone you were part of this jury. I mean, how messed up does that have to be? I've been hearing from federal prosecutors who prosecuted RICO crimes who didn't have this much trouble. I mean, it's just insane. Already, Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has amplified a debunked story about a voting machine in Georgia flipping a Trump vote to a vote for Vice President Kamala Harris during early voting, which I discussed, I believe it was yesterday, that it was user error. You just hit the wrong button, which I have already pointed out. Depending on the size of the buttons and how the touchscreen works. I mean, hell, you can do that with paper ballots. It's really easy for your eyes to go from one line to another and accidentally vote for the wrong person. This is easy. It's easy to do. That doesn't mean it has to be nefarious. It just means it's not even a matter of stupidity. It is just easy for the eyes to go from one line to another. And then you are losing track of where you are. I mean, you can do that with reading. I've done it with reading. All right. And in recent weeks, Trump-aligned members of the Georgia State Election Board have passed rules that seem to allow local election board members to vote against certifying election results. When a judge undercut those rules, he received death threats online. I really wonder how many of these people who are pushing death threats, considering the cesspool that is social media, I wonder how many of those people, if there was an actual civil war like the Republicans seem to desperately want, I mean, there are some Democrats who may not want it, but are afraid that it's going to happen. I wonder how many of these people would wet themselves rather than if they were actually in a war. That it's easy to play tough behind a screen, but it's a lot harder when consequences of your actions are right at your doorstep. All right. 4 years ago, talk of a stolen election, despite multiple audits and recounts proving otherwise, helped propel Daryl Kidd to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, where a mob of Trump supporters violently breached the Capitol. Wearing a Trump Save America hat outside a Trump rally in Atlanta earlier this month, Kidd said he did not participate in any of the violence that day, but he did have doubts about the 2020 election. Well, at least he didn't get violent, so there's something. But the fact that despite all the what's the word? My brain, it stopped. All the judicial activity, I can't think of the word. This has been litigated. That's the word. Litigated so many times. And Trump was found to be on the losing end of all of them. Are you seriously telling me that all the people on the juries everywhere are against Trump? That's hard to believe. Now, there's a lot of things about him that I can't stand. There's a lot of things that, I would not want him to be president again. That's not going to prevent me from looking at evidence and deciding whether he did a crime or not. Because I'm able to differentiate, I think he sucks, with, I think he did this crime. Those don't necessarily go together. I mean, sure, there are some people who can't be that open-minded. And you know what happens? They don't get picked for juries. So, yeah. This time, I think it's going to be more secure, Kidd said. In Georgia, anyway, I think we'll be more protected. I wonder if he's going to still think that if Trump loses. I'm serious. I mean, if he was so willing to believe Trump the first time, and after all the crap he's been saying, he's still willing to believe Trump this time, I really wonder if he's going to believe Trump when he tells him that it was stolen from him. I mean, I'd like to think that he's not quite that far gone, but he's still voting for Trump despite everything Trump has done and said. A controversial overhaul of Georgia election laws has given him some confidence. Kidd is less secure about other states. He said he would not rule out protesting the result again. Okay, I should have read that before I made my comment. So yeah, basically, he has no understanding of how elections work. He thinks that a hand count is somehow going to be miraculously more secure, which I have no idea why he thinks that, because people make mistakes. I think we've all lost count at some point. I mean, and now you're dealing with election workers who are dead tired and have to hand count ballots that are counted by the machines multiple times to ensure that the counts are accurate. Are you seriously telling me that you trust people more than you trust a machine for counting? Seriously, do you look at your calculator when it makes a calculation and question whether it gave you the accurate answer? Dude, that's why we have calculators, so you don't have to do complex math. Is counting complex? Depends on how high you're counting. Like I said, it's perfectly easy to miscount. That's why when tellers are giving you money, they count it out loud. They don't count it to themselves. They count it out loud. So you are also witnessing whether they screw up. to ensure that you get the money that you asked for. So, how can you possibly think that that is more secure than allowing a machine to do it? Especially a machine that's not attached to the internet. Because not all machines are. I just don't see how you can think this is secure. Now, this overhaul that they're talking about, if it's just truly the hand counting, well, that was overturned. So is he still going to be confident? And, he said he won't rule out protesting the results again. That just tells me that if Trump loses, he's going to protest. He has already bought into the fact that Trump can do no wrong, and that the only way that that anybody would vote against him is if it was fraudulent. I'm sorry, that is not how things work. All right. Waiting in line nearby and decked out in red, friends Tina McKay and Dory Walters had been processing the more recent political violence, the assassination attempts against Trump. They said that the attempts did give them pause about coming to a campaign rally, but not for long. I thought about it when it first happened. I thought how scary that would be, but as soon as I was able to get a ticket here, I didn't think twice about it, McKay said. I do fear for him because I think he's got a huge target on his back, Walter said. Yeah, dictators and wannabe dictators generally do. I mean, do I condone it? No. Do I find it understandable? Yeah. I find it understandable, and let's face it, Trump, anything he doesn't like, hell, he even said that he wants retribution against his political opponents. You cannot say shit like that and then be shocked that somebody wants to kill you. And it's, from what I heard, it's not even liberals, even though he claims it's Democrats, because of course he does. It's not even liberals. These are people who were voting for him, and he disillusioned them. So these are already people who were willing to be violent. Now, do I think that there are no Democrats who are willing to be violent? Of course not. I'm not that stupid. But in this case, it's not happening. Anyway, the motives behind the two assassination attempts remain unclear. Do they really? Walters and McKay, like other voters at the rally, said they blamed Democrats, not Trump, for spiking the political temperature. I'm sorry. You are calling immigrants, I know that you desperately want to think just the immigrants you don't like, but he goes after all immigrants, especially if you're brown, as all of them being bad people. He doesn't differentiate people who come and then eventually commit crimes with people who are just trying to get a better life. He doesn't differentiate. It's entirely possible these two don't either. But you can't accuse immigrants of being bad people. You cannot say that you're going to go after your political opponents for retribution. You can't, what was happening in his first term, wanting to sic the military on peaceful protesters just so he could appear like a strong man, or just so he could walk across the street because apparently people scare him. You don't get to do that stuff and then claim that the other side is raising the political temperature. Just because you do not like that we are calling him what he is, which is a fascist and a danger to democracy. Now, did it help that people were saying stupid shit about Bush before him? Oh, what a quaint time when we just made fun of the fact that Bush wrote his speeches in crayon. At least he didn't try to topple a democracy. So I get it. You don't like that people are calling him what he is, a fascist, a racist, whatever else. I get that because that's a attack on you. Because if you hold all those same views, then you don't like to be called fascist or racist. But just because someone is giving you a label that you earned by the words you say is not the same as making shit up so you can so your supporters can attack them. Trump is making shit up just so people will get riled up. How can you say that someone who's making shit up isn't raising political temperature, but the other side, who's worried about his supporters attacking others, somehow is? I mean, how far under a rock do you have to be to not realize that not the same thing? Kamala Harris is not going to go after you even if she believed that all his supporters were fascist. Even if she were to believe that. She believes Trump is fascist. That doesn't mean that she's going to personally attack him when if she becomes president. No, she's going to let the courts deal with him because that's how it works in a democracy. So I'm not sure what exactly, like I said, this has got to be a ego defense mechanism that they can't handle that they're being called names because they can't handle that, it's true. And they don't like that people are telling them the truth about who they are as people. Both campaigns have described their opponents as grave threats to the country, but it is Trump who talks of bypassing democratic norms and uses language laced with violent imagery. Exactly. Personal attacks and incendiary claims. His own former chief of staff, John Kelly, in remarks published by the New York Times this week, called Trump a fascist. I'm glad that this has come out. But you're a little late, aren't you? Now, granted, I'm not sure if it was Kelly or Mark Milley. Not sure which one, where he brought up the Hitler's generals and they had to break it to him that the generals tried to put a hit on Hitler. So, I'm not sure. But yeah, it would have been nice if it was more out there, like a 60 Minutes interview or something that is, and certainly not right before an election. At his Atlanta rally, Trump called on supporters to help defeat the enemy at all levels of combat. Yeah, that doesn't scream violence at all. No. Some of his harshest rhetoric has targeted immigrants. At a rally on Thursday, he blamed Harris for an invasion of criminal migrants, saying the U.S. had become a garbage can for the world. No. No. And, I mean, I just don't know what else to say about this. Here's a guy who got out of combat in Vietnam because of bone spurs, because he's rich, who is way too enamored with the military and violence. Maybe they should have sent him to Nam. I'm sure he wouldn't be quite as enamored with violence if he was there. But he can be violent because he knows it won't affect him. he'll be protected. And as for the garbage can of the world, we are not the garbage can of the world. We are still the shining beacon on the hill. People still look to us. That's why the NATO alliance is totally freaked out right now about what would happen if Trump becomes president. Because if he pulls out of NATO, it's not just that they lose their biggest army, and that it would be harder for them to defend themselves without that army. But that also means that he would be free to attack NATO members with our large army. So, yeah, it's scary for them. So, no, they don't think you're the garbage can of the world. The only person who thinks that the U.S. is the garbage can of the world is Trump and his supporters. For someone who claims that the Democrats hate this country and hate democracy, he's certainly the one who's showing that he hates this country and hates democracy, because he never stops undermining this country, always saying how horrible it is and how it's gone downhill and make America great again. I'm sorry, what is your definition of great? And usually when you ask one of his supporters, it's crickets, because many of them know that in order to say what would make America great again, they would have to shit on minorities. They would have to say that they want to be able to step all over whomever they want. And they know they can't say that because they know that would make them a garbage human. So they have to either say crickets or, pull the attack on, or reverse the attack on you, because they just can't accept, even though they know that their beliefs are considered garbage, they are still butthurt. They still are thin-skinned about being called garbage. It's like, you don't want to be called garbage? Stop having garbage opinions. It's really that simple. Alright, for Daniela Usurin, who is originally from Uruguay, Trump's hardline stance is welcome. Seriously? Usurin said illegal immigration reflects poorly on immigrants like her. Do you really think Trump gives a rat's ass about you? He doesn't care that you came legally. You're still brown. But Trump has made false claims about migrants who are legally in the country too. Exactly. I mean, look at the Haitian immigrants in Springfield. From the debate stage, I'm always ahead of this article. From the debate stage, he amplified a false story about migrants in Springfield, Ohio, eating cats and dogs. The community became overwhelmed with bomb threats. Because that's exactly how you react to Haitian migrants eating pets. You call in bomb threats to the entire freaking city. Even if that were true, how does that help? Now, granted, it was implied that Russia was behind it, but still, not a good look. As far as those issues in Ohio, I really can't say what's the reality, Usurin said. Are you kidding me? You really are doubting, you're really questioning who is right? I mean, I'm sure the mayor and the mayor of Springfield and the governor of Ohio would probably know if Haitian migrants are doing that. So you're saying I don't know what's the reality? Seriously. Do you hear the arguments of the earth is a sphere, the earth is flat, and think, "Oh, I can't say what's the reality." Seriously, how far does your both sidesism go? And that's what drives me nuts about the media, treating both sides as they, in many cases, like they both have points. Now, when they both do have points, that's fine. But for anything and everything, even though the other side doesn't have a point, yeah, that that's what allows people like this. They can't say what's the reality because they have to witness it for themselves. Seriously, what is going on here? The reality is that city and state officials have debunked the claim as false, but many at the Trump rallies say they believe them, or at least the campaign's description of the country facing an invasion of illegal immigrants. Many immigrant communities are fearful, as they should be, because, as I mentioned yesterday, there are plenty of people out there who just the fact that you're brown or that you speak in broken English is enough to get them to question your citizenship status. Again, it would have to be brown and broken English. Like I said, nobody on their side has any problem with Melania, even though she got in under dubious circumstances. So, yeah. At a recent Democratic canvassing kickoff at Peachy Corners Cafe in the Atlanta suburbs, love that name, Trump's rhetoric was weighing on many of the volunteers picking up campaign flyers, Vietnamese coffee, and bubble tea. It's just dividing us even more, so unnecessarily, with these non-truths and made-up stories, said Tamida Shamsuddin, who immigrated from Bangladesh 2 decades ago. You know, it's because of these made-up stories and non-truths that's causing the divide. Because a lot of people were able to be friends with, Democrats being friends with Republicans, even if they didn't agree on the issues, because even though they didn't agree, they could act like human beings to each other. That is no longer the case, and that's because of this disinformation and misinformation that is propagating, and that the Republicans seem to be actively encouraging. So, yeah, I would say that many people were divided in the fact that they didn't agree with someone's stance on an issue, but it wasn't to the point of I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. I mean, I've gotten to the point where if you're still a Trump voter, I want nothing to do with you, because I don't care what your reasoning is. We know that whatever your reasoning is made up bullshit. So, well, for the most part, I'm talking about Trump voters, active voters, actively supporting Trump, not those who are like, oh, but Kamala Harris in Gaza, which, granted, that is a legit concern, but if you think Trump is going to be better, yeah. Anyway. And I never felt like I was anything less than because I came here, got an education, got a job, and became what I hope is a contributing citizen. It's personal for me and it's hurtful, she said. Of course it is. Because again, people are just going to look at her and assume that she couldn't possibly be a citizen because of the way she looks. Heck, people who don't have broken English, but who just happen to be brown, mostly brown, but also probably also black. People question their citizenship and say, go back to where you came from. simply because they assume because they're not white, they couldn't possibly be Americans. And some of them even stupidly say that to Native Americans, which, as horrid as it is kind of funny though. While Shamsuddin, who is wearing a Harris Waltz camouflage hat, is committed to the campaign work, she said knocking on doors of strangers to talk about the election can be anxiety-inducing in this environment. Oh, honey, I remember canvassing for, I believe it was Obi. No, it wasn't Obi. Who was it? Oh, shoot. I can't think of his name right now. And trust me, a teenager, like, 15, 16, I can't remember. I was probably middle teen, and going to some parts of town, which would be considered the poor parts of town. Yeah, that was just, that was scary for me. That was anxiety inducing for me. So I can only imagine the all-out panic attack that could happen from doing this. So I wouldn't say anxiety inducing. I would go closer to panic attack. At a high top of the by the why can't I read? At a high top by the espresso machine, Todd Viln said he had just came in for a quiet spot to read his comic books. He said the language to describe immigrants is shaping his vote, though. I'm a gun owner. I find I want to vote Republican, Viln said, but the rhetoric towards immigrants has been something that has made me not to want to vote Republican. Yes, you know who else are gun owners? Harris and Walz. They're both gun owners. So the fact that you're a gun owner should not be the reason to vote Republican. I mean, unless you are saying that you want to be able to shoot at whomever you want, in which case, fine. Viln came to the U.S. as a refugee from Cambodia in 1980. He said he fled from an authoritarian regime. Preserving democracy is one of the issues motivating him. Well, at least something. Viln fondly remembers his family receiving a welcome basket within a few days of arriving in the U.S. He feels that spirit has now faded, but he said the political climate has made him more resolved to vote. He is wrangling the schedules of his son, niece, and nephew, who turned 18 this year, so they can go to the polls as a family. Well, that's nice. We want to make it a big deal, he said. I want us as a family to symbolically vote in a way that shows we're part of this country. Viln said he sees his vote as more than a choice for president. For him, it is a way to assert he belongs in the country that gave him refuge all those years ago. And that's the case for a lot of people. They have so much love and respect for this country. Otherwise, they wouldn't come here. And they certainly wouldn't try to become citizens. So, and a lot of people want to vote for the guy who's going to kick them in the teeth. I mean, this is a man who thinks that kicking out immigrants who have served the U.S. They have been in the military, and he still wants to deport them. I mean, seriously. I realize you think that the military are filled with suckers and losers, but they're also patriots. I mean, you do not join the military if your only desire is to shit on this country. No, that's Trump who wants to shit on this country. And he never served. And for those who want to claim that neither did Biden, he has asthma. Or at least he used to. So the military didn't want him. It's not like he tried to get out of serving. I mean, the man is so proud of Bo for serving. He names all his dogs after military ranks. This guy loves the military, and I'm sure if he could, he would have served. But he couldn't because of a medical exemption, which, unlike Trump's, wasn't bogus. Because this wasn't some friend of the family, a doctor who's a friend of the family who wanted to do his father a solid. No, this was a doctor who actually examined him, probably even a military doctor, because like I said, Biden probably wanted to serve, and said, yeah, no. So, yeah, I just, and of course, Kamala Harris. Did I say Kamala? Kamala Harris. She didn't serve either, but I don't know. Maybe she wanted to. Maybe she just wasn't allowed. Maybe it never came up. Just because you don't serve in the military doesn't mean you shit on them. Kamala Harris has great respect for the military. So does Tim Walz, who was in part of the National Guard. They have great respect. You don't have to serve in the military to have that. You do, however, by your rhetoric, can see whether a person gives a crap about the military, and Trump does not. So anyway, I got a bit off topic there. So yeah, I understand why there are some people who are threatening violence, but it's not a both sides issue, because the people who tend to lean towards violence are the ones who are going to vote for Trump. If not this time, at least in the past they did. So they already have a penchant for violence. So the Democrats are very quick to denounce violence. So are there the occasional Democrat who will try violence? Sure. I'm not saying that all Democrats are perfect. Of course not. But lately, I think you can pretty much tell on what side of the spectrum a person is who commits violence, especially if it's election violence or violence against minorities. So yeah, it's a pretty safe bet. Not foolproof by any means, but a fairly safe bet. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.